All right. So I'm just going to do a brief introduction and then we'll turn it over to you guys. Hi, I'm Wendy Murdoch, and this is Webinars with Wendy. I've been doing a series of webinars for the past 2 months with equine professionals from all around the world. The information has been so amazing and incredible, and it's such a pleasure to bring these unique individuals and their talents to you through Zoom. Today we have Pam Eckelbarger and Diane Dzingle, Pam Dzingle, and they are in the bone room, which is in Aiken, South Carolina. I didn't know about the bone room when I was down there this spring, but if I had, I would most certainly have stopped in to pay a visit. So they're going to show us all about bones. I'm going to let them each briefly introduce themselves to you so you get to learn a little bit about them, and then they're going to take us through a tour of their bones.
Good. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you so much for holding all these webinars. It's been great education. Amazing. And thank you to COVID for letting us have the time to do this. So I'm Pam.
I'm Diane.
We're the Bone Bitches.
We're the Bone Bitches. We were given that name by Pam's husband.
Yes, yes. And if he appears in the door, ignore him. So do you want us to go through a little
yeah, like I always like to have just a little bit of background so people know, how did you wind up here doing this?
We ask that question every day.
It was a long road. Well, I'll try and be brief. I'll say that people can go to the About page on Equus-Soma.com and read about both of us. But I grew up with a horse family in Western New York. Very fortunate. Started riding at 5, did horse shows, fox hunting, ended up being low-level eventing and dressage into college years. And then I gave up riding while I pursued a master's degree in zoology at University of New Hampshire.
My alma mater.
That's right.
Yeah.
I went down to, got a job at an oceanographic lab, nothing to do with horses, in Florida, where I was there for like 15 or 16 years as a research a scientist. But working on animals that don't have backbones. So I got to do research there, met my husband, who's also a scientist. In 1991, we moved to Maine because my husband got a job with the University of Maine as director of their marine laboratory campus, the Darwin Marine Center. And I was there as an associate scientist for about 4 or 5 years with space, but no money. So I had to write grant proposals, and it was very fun. Meanwhile, I got back into horses. My family had continued on in Western New York, breeding. For a while, my dad was breeding thoroughbreds for a small racetrack, and then he and my sister started blending the Connemara group with thoroughbreds. So they were continually doing horses, and I had been out of horses for 20 years. So anyways, I wanted to start riding again, and they shipped me a horse named Petey, who I'll tell you all about because he started this. I stopped being a scientist. I started being a photographer. So I was an equine photographer since 1992 to 2014, photographing events, dressage shows. The name was Hoof Picks, if anyone remembers from up north. And then got out of that and started doing body work on horses. Became very interested in it so I could help my own horses. Went to Masterson method, the 2-day, the 5-day advance. Then I met Dr. Kerry Ridgway down here in Aiken, and he introduced me to the fascial system and his therapeutic protocol. So I got to work with him. I also went to Upledger and didn't go to Upledger, but I took the 4 levels of craniosacral, equine craniosacral course at Upledger. And then I started digging up bones, and I met her. So that's how I got here.
Okay.
I grew up in the Pacific Northwest on an island. I was fortunate to have a pony from the age of 9. I was in pony club. I did the whole pony club thing until I graduated high school. Also did eventing, low-level dressage, a little bit of competition, but nothing serious. I guess there was a period in my 20s when I was going to college, getting married, that kind of stuff, that I didn't have a horse, but then I got back into horses in my late 20s. It was my goal to have a horse again by the time I was 30. Achieved that goal, did a little bit more eventing in my 30s and 40s. Got into equine bodywork after a whole host of other jobs that were not equine related, because I think like most equine bodyworkers, you get into it because you have a horse that has issues that nobody else can figure out. And so you start this journey and it never ends. So I did Masterson Method. I'm a certified Masterson Method practitioner. I did a structural integration course with a human color worker. So that's all fascial work. And I'm currently in my 3rd year at the Blugan Institute for Equine Osteopathy. Jillian mentioned Blugan last night.
Yep.
So lucky to have Jillian be a part of my current horse's program with her in-hand work and all of the biomechanical things that she brings to, in addition to body work, because body work can get things moving, but you kind of then have to change the way they move.
Yeah.
So,
Totally.
So cool to see Jillian last night, and all of the things that she was talking about are near and dear to our heart.
Yeah, it's
so
awesome.
I moved to Aiken, South Carolina in 2014 to get away from snow. And met Pam, and the rest is history.
So what year did you open the bone room?
About a year ago.
Okay, it's really new. I noticed that your horses are COVID compliant.
Did you notice that?
We'll get a little tour. So we'll go slow here. These are the skulls. Yes, everybody is paying attention to the protocols.
That's awesome. I'm glad to see that, you know.
And no worries, no PPE will be wasted. These will be reused.
Oh, good. Okay.
I don't think they're breathing too heavily right now. At least I hope they aren't.
Yep.
Yeah, so I got down here. I started coming to Aiken in 2008, just for like the February, March time when most of the eventers from the north escape the snow and come down. So I fell in love with Aiken and ended up in the next 5 years since then, slowly coming longer, renting a place, buying a place. And then I finally bought this farm, I think in 2014. And I have a little 6-acre farm here. And so that's how we met. And that's when I started doing more of the body work and working with Dr. Ridgway. So,
and it just happened to have this little room that you have all ready for you?
No.
I'll show you some pictures of my presentation on what it was.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yep. So, yeah, essentially I, in my coursework with both the body work and upledger, the craniosacral, and we both done dissections, full horse dissections with the von Ruddick. I really wanted to get a skeleton. I wanted to get bones that I could take to clients, bodywork clients, and show them, you know, this is an SI, this is a bit, this is that. But at that time, to buy one was $10,000 to $14,000.
Yeah.
So that's
crazy expensive.
I talked to my husband and said, I know where there's a skeleton. So when you're ready, I'll launch into the presentation.
Well, I just want to tell everybody, you know, like in honor of the bone room, I chose an archaeological dig as my background. I figured it was appropriate for today.
It is.
Yep. All right. Well, I think we're all ready to go.
Okay. So awesome. Share screen, correct?
Yep. And I'm going to spotlight you so that you've got that screen.
All right. I'm going to put this up and then, oh, wait. I did it too soon. Where'd you go? There we are. Okay, share screen. And there it is. Okay, and now I'm gonna do play, right?
Yep.
Okay. So, do you see it?
Yep.
All right, I hope everybody sees it. Oh, there you are. I have to move you all the time. You're always in the way, Wendy.
I know. Where do you want me to move?
I'm good. You're good. Okay, I'm going to try and be as brief as possible just to get through a little bit of the history. But the reason for this, what we're doing now, pretty much started here with the skeleton that I dug up for my needs, and it ended up being my horse, Petey, who this is my dad, Western New York, bred him for the track. He's very well-bred thoroughbred, went to the track to start training and ended up bowing a tendon at 3, and my dad brought him back home to rehab him. And they ended up doing breedings of other horses and put Petey out in the pasture just to heal. Meanwhile, I'm down in Florida doing my oceanographic stuff, so I didn't know Petey. So in 1991, my husband and I moved to Maine, and I wanted to get back into riding, and so I called home and said, hey, you got a horse? Dad said, yep, we got Petey. So he hasn't done anything for 3 years, but after the track, he had been trained to jump. He did some low-level novice eventing, before he hurt himself. He actually hurt his back doing some jumping, and that's when he was thrown out in the pasture. So my sister brought him up to me. This is Petey and myself meeting for the first time, and make a very long story short, Petey got me back riding again and eventing again, and this is one of the last events I did with him in '97. So, oops, uh-oh.
You gotta make sure you click on, there you go. Got
okay. All right, so fast forward to 2016 when I was looking for a skeleton. So Petey lived with me till he was 23 years old. We had a wonderful time together. He taught other young people how to do events. He was the best horse to build confidence. He loved to jump. He hated dressage. He was fantastic, but he developed tumors in his lungs. So I had to put him down when he was 23 years old, and we buried him at the farm in Maine. So now fast forward to 2016 when I decided to dig him up. And so this is Peter, who buried him, came back to help me. This is my pit, Wendy.
All right. How deep did you bury him?
Oh my God. Well, Peter thought we buried him about 6 feet, but the excavator dug about 8 feet before we pulled up a tibia. And
Yeah.
that's when we stopped, because I didn't want the excavator hurting the bones. So then I did everything else by hand, and I went down another 3 or 4 feet. And it was Maine rocks and dirt and some clay. But it was so much fun, and it was like an archaeological dig. It was just so cool. I had all the tools and the brushes and everything. And so this is Petey's front limbs. I wanted to uncover all of them, but there just wasn't enough room to throw all the dirt out of the way. So I was able to do sections of him. Peter had laid him down beautifully. His shoes are still on. I didn't know the anatomy at the time so well, so I had all the labels made out. And I went down there and I quietly, I labeled all the bones, and then I brought them up. This is the last part that I got to, was his skull, and that's the only time I cried. Sorry, Petey. So these are the bones that are pulled out, and then this is what they look like about a month later after I cleaned them up.
And okay, so I do have to ask this question. How did you clean them up?
It's a long process, and it depends on what's on them. I'm fortunate with most of the bones that we get here, we kind of wait until we don't have much meat on them anymore. We don't do the boiling or beetle thing. No. So I kind of air dry them, then I brush extraneous dirt off, then they soak. They soak in Dawn dish soap, which is a degreaser. Best to do it in hot water. It doesn't take as long, and you have to change it frequently. And then if I want them to whiten a little bit, I'll put them in a peroxide solution.
Okay.
And soak them in that for about 24 hours. And then I rinse them really well and just put them out in the air to dry. So you can see that Petey stayed kind of a nice flesh color, which I like. I don't.
Beautiful, actually. I mean, I've seen a lot of different bones, and these are really beautiful.
Yeah. So now we go to 2018. So I bring Petey back here, and this is when Diane and I met. And Diane wanted to dig up her own skeleton.
Because I was just going to start at the Blugan Institute, and I was like, my gosh, I need one of these to study with. And I couldn't believe that it was really possible that you could dig a horse up. I was very inspired.
So tell them where you went.
Well, and so I have a client that was kind enough to let me dig a giant hole in her pasture. She had a 28-year-old quarter horse that she had had for 26 of those 28 years. So they had a long history together. And her son happens to have an excavating company. So he had a giant excavator and dug an 8-foot deep pit. And like Pam, I was a little worried we'd get into the bones. So I had him stop after we dug so far and hadn't found anything. And I had a shovel, and I said, well, I'll dig for 2 hours. And if I don't find anything, I'll give up. But I hit his carpal bones in about 10 minutes. And because I was in Savannah, Georgia, where it's silica sand, with the help of 2 other clients of mine, we had all of the bones out in 6 hours. It was just like slick as could be.
Took me 8 days. But then I was labeling everything.
Yeah, I didn't label anything, and somebody did take some pictures, but it wasn't really pretty like Pam's was, that's for sure.
So we ended up, then we had Petey, and in between getting this horse, that's name is Edge, I had acquired some bones from the Aiken area from some farms that let me go dig in their areas. So I had scatterings of other horses with Petey, but the digs were Petey and Edge. And then 2 summers ago, I went back to Maine, and a good friend of mine who's up in the area and also here in Aiken, Polymerrill, had seen the Petey bones, and she was very excited, and she said, will you dig up my eventer? She actually wanted me to dig up 3 horses on the farm she had just sold, but it ended up that this took a month.
I was going to say, that's a huge undertaking.
This is because this horse's name is Mikey, and all this information, the story is on the website for anyone who wants to go into the details. And so Mikey took a lot longer. It took 3 days to find. And then once we found him, he was in clay. Yeah, so this is all just almost solid clay. And anytime it rained, I couldn't go back there to work on it because I'd slip and fall down.
Right.
It's heavy lifting, but you can see here we pulled out, these are 2 hind shoes, still have the coffin bones in them. And then when I got to the thoracic area, this picture shows a rib that I'm pulling out of literal goo. It was hydrogen sulfide.
Oh,
you can see my gloves are just covered. It was so gross. But we managed to get all but, I think, 3 ribs. It took a month and it was hard work. We got him cleaned up. He's here in the bone lab. He's got some really fascinating bones, but I told Polly I'm not going back for the other 2. So then I discovered this wonderful woman in Maine who started a business about, I think, 8 years now ago, I think, 7 or 8.
Hey, Pam, can I interrupt you for a second?
Sure.
I just looked at the questions and somebody said that it's not very loud. I'm just wondering if you can up the volume a tiny bit.
How's that?
Oh, that's great.
So I was also leaning over the laptop. Is it okay now?
Yep, let me just, if anybody has a problem with sound, just pop it up in the chat. I've got to move me out of the way to see the chat. Okay. All right, nobody's saying anything, so I think we're good. Okay.
All right, yell. So a month after I had gotten Mikey out of the pits of despair, I had known about this woman, her name's Michelle from Auburn, Maine, had started this business of composting horses. And I actually had written her an email the summer before thinking, oh, source of bones, right? She never answered my email that year. And then I started going around with Petey and giving presentations, and she heard about it. So when I contacted her in the summer of 2018 after digging up Mikey, she got right back to me. And she says, yes, I know who you are. We need to meet. I'm fascinated with bones, blah, blah, blah. So she invited me to the farm. And she's an amazing woman. She works for a veterinarian. She has horses. She's an animal lover. Very, very literally compassionate, and she felt that there was a better way for people to take care of the horses when they had to put them to sleep. So many people in Maine are not allowed to bury them. They have to either render them or whatever. So she got herself trained in composting, went to the programs for that. She's also trained in horse rescue. So she has a sled, she has a stock trailer with a hitch, and she will get a call from a veterinarian or an owner who have planned to put their horse down, and she will go to the farm and work with the vet. She's wonderfully respectful. Everybody loves her demeanor when she's with this whole sad point of time. And when the horse is put down, she will gently get it onto the sled and bring it back to this farm of hers in Auburn. And this is kind of closed into woods area. And she brings in manure from various outside farms. And she builds compost piles. And these seen here, she calls windrows, and probably in this one there might be, I don't know, 8 or 10 maybe horses.
Oh, wow.
Yep. And I won't go into too much of the detail, but it's a wonderful process because they're not buried in ground. She builds a pad about 2 feet high and lays the body on the pad. And then she tags it, so there's a tag going to the outside, so she knows where that horse is, who it was, where he was when he was put in the pile, and then she covers them up. People who don't want the compost back, some people do. They like to put it in their, not their vegetable garden, but their flower garden, or make a memorial. Yeah. Some people want some of the bones back, but most people, I'd say the majority, are like, this is it. Thank you very much. He's gone, and it's just the body. So that's when she puts them in windrows. And after a period of time, it's a thermal process. So the heat really builds up and breaks them down. She will then turn the pile. She'll put more manure in, fresh material, and turn it. It's an amazing, strenuous, difficult process, and she does it pretty much by herself.
Wow.
She'll do this several times, and bones will filter out. Then she'll go and hand pick them and get them out of the way. Then she'll sift the piles, and what she ends up is the most beautiful compost you can imagine. So anyway, so she had me come, and I told her my interests, and she was aware of what I did, but she's very possessive of all the animals in her compost area. And I told her I'm very interested, if any of the owners are interested in donating the remains of their horse, then I'd love to be able to dig them up. And she said, okay. So she went through the list, and she found on my first visit, this was a Frisian. And I have to tell you, in 15 minutes, we had this. So,
wow.
Yeah. So no more digging for us.
You can see the beauty of composting in our world.
It was pretty amazing. And this horse actually was pretty amazing. So the composting is pretty much, that's where we've gotten the majority of our members of our learning center here. Thanks to the owners who have given permission. Thanks to Michelle for being, taking care and labeling them and helping when I'm there. She's helping with me. She loves it because she gets to learn too. So it's a wonderful facility. This is another, just a view to show. This was last summer when my riding teacher came because she knew this horse, and she was uncovering her skull. And you can see the beauty of, you can see the bones in situ many times. This is how they are in the compost.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a nice process. So very quickly, here's the cleaning process. These are bones that have not been processed.
Yep.
They're just, we brushed them off for loose dirt. We have stock and Sterilite tubs. If anyone wants to make money, buy more stock and Sterilite tubs.
Yeah.
This is the washing process. And then these are them out after the hydrogen peroxide, some of the bones out drying.
So someone asked a question about how long does it take for a buried horse to decompose enough to be bones, to just be the bones?
Yeah, good question. In Maine, oops, where they have, going too fast here. No, it's doing that what I wanted to. Hold on a minute. I'll ask the question in a second. We just
Get back there.
done.
There we go.
Yep.
Okay, sorry about that.
Play. There you go. Perfect.
Okay, so to answer the question, up there in Maine where they have a winter, it's anywhere from 10 to 12 months down to bone. We have found that 12 months is a little better than 10 because when you get up around the thoracic area and the abdominal area, there's often remains in that area. We have a few brewing down here in Aiken, and we had a foal, a stillborn full-term foal that was donated, and that took 3 months.
3 months.
Wow.
And there was very little goo left.
Very little.
Yeah.
So
it was right down to it.
Yeah. If you're going to bury them, though, that all depends on your substrate. So the sand at the edge had.
Yeah, edge was in for 6 years, and that was about perfect because we tried for another horse that had been in for 10, and those bones looked like sawdust.
Oh.
So that's why we ended up going for edge. It was going to be this pony, but when we finally found something, the heads of the femur and whatnot were just crumbling off because it had been too long. So it really does depend on the type of material they're buried in and the temperature of the ground.
The acidity, yeah. Yeah,
Right.
and like Petey was dug up beautifully. He was in 10 years in more dirt and boulders and things. But an hour and a half south of me in Maine was Mikey, and he was in clay for 10 years. And the clay just prevented anything from decomposing. So that's why a lot of it was goo, because there was still muscle material attached to the bones.
Wow. So it varies that much.
Yeah. So this is what happened to Petey after I brought him back to Aiken and just had him in my garage to study him. People started coming to see him, and I ended up putting him on the road, taking him on the road. And these are what I did for about a year or so, doing Petey presentations. Because
what a great idea.
I could fit him in the back of my truck. It would take me 2 hours to unload and set him up and 2 hours to load and pack him up again. but it was a lot of fun. These were, I took him back to Maine, and these are riding schools, riding summer camps with kids. They'd bring their horses out and I'd show them where, bones are on the horse. This is actually at one of the dissections that we did with Evie Ruddick in 2 years ago in May, and we brought Petey, and it was fantastic because she'd be dissecting and she'd go, Pam, go get the pelvis. We'd run over to Petey's pelvis and hold it up where she was dissecting. So Petey became quite popular. He also met some very well-known people. Our lovely Jillian. Petey was a demo brought some bones, and that's when I met Jillian at one of her clinics. Garrett Hoishman was in North Carolina doing one of his clinics, and I brought Petey there, so he got to use Petey for demonstration. Mary Wanless got to meet Petey, and Tom Myers, Anatomy Trains, who's in Maine. I met him by inviting him to come see Petey's bones when I dug him up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that was fun because he's quite the anatomist. Human or horse, he's quite the anatomist. And
I didn't realize he was a horse anatomist.
Well, the anatomy is so similar.
Yes, it is, actually.
Yeah. And his ex-wife now was a horse person. She actually invited me to come down and do body work on them, so I did. And every time I go back summer, they have me back to do some things with their horses. But he's so knowledgeable. He was looking at Petey's bones and showing me all kinds of pathologies I had no idea. So yeah, it was cool. Okay, so this is your question. We got Petey was taking up a lot of room in the garage. Edge wasn't here quite yet. And my husband said, do something. So our initial dream was to try and open a museum in Aiken, but that's just too, we don't have the money to lease property and it's just too expensive. And so my husband said, let's take our 3-day shed that's just used for storage and renovate it. And that's what we did.
Oh, it's beautiful.
It is. They did a great job. We put it in the back, and it's already overflowing.
There's bones in the tack room. Bones
Isn't there another bay to the left there that you can just knock a wall out?
Well, yes, there is.
That's the manure pile. Yeah, we're working on it. All right, so this is just briefly what the Learning Center, we decided it's about. It's mostly research because that's what we love doing, and discovery, which is even more fun than research. Brings up so many, we have more questions than answers half the time. Yeah. And then like today, educate other horse people, because I didn't know any of this stuff. And every day we come in here, we learn something new. The center is open for, well, when COVID's not going, it's open for visitors. We have small group visitors. We call that the short format. And then we have long format, which is roughly up to 15 people. We've made rooms so we can pack them all in, and we do like 4 hours a whole day of anatomy. We cater to whatever anyone wants to learn. If they don't know anything, we have Anatomy 101. If they want to, we've had a group, Mike Scott, who's a bunch of body workers and saddle fitters, right, from Camden. He brought a whole group down, his classes down. And so we just cater to whatever anyone wants to look. Are
you a nonprofit organization?
No, not yet. We're just out of pocket.
Right. Well, I was just, thinking that if people wanted to donate, if you were a nonprofit, we could,
we could donate anyways.
We have a jar by the door.
Yeah.
Well, this is clearly a labor of love. That's what's so obvious about this.
Oh, we do charge for the tours, right, or whatever you want to call it, the sessions. I mean, it's not much. What do we charge? $25 for just like the 2 hour with anywhere from 2 to 6 people, and $50 per person for these long days. And that's what we do.
It's
now.
a start.
It's a start. We mostly want people not to be turned away because they feel they have to pay for something to get this kind of information. We're also open to, we're more and more, no, I won't do that, I can scan later. We're both bookophiles. And I collect every kind of book on anatomy and everything
having to do
here.
With courses.
And so the center's open for people like, this is a budding osteopath. hi Beth, if you're there, colleague and neighbor of ours, and she needed to study on one of her modules for the osteopathy school, so she came over for a few hours and had all the books laid out and studying all the the neck bones. I invite veterinarians. Not many come, but if they come here to treat the horses, I drag them in here to see bones. So yeah, so that's what we're open for. Diane, we really want to rearticulate a full skeleton. That's what we don't have here yet.
Okay.
It's going to happen.
It's going to happen.
Yeah.
To learn how to do it properly, or quote unquote properly, means either going to the Netherlands or Pennsylvania, but that's not going to work. There's not too many people that teach how to do this.
Oh, really? So because I know that like at my alma mater at UK, they have a fully articulated skeleton. I actually snuck in there and took a lot of photographs. But I didn't realize that that was something that is like a specialty training to learn how to do.
Oh, it's quite a process.
It's quite a process.
Yeah.
There is a book written, and Diane has been using that to get ideas, and she's the mechanical person here, so she gets all the drills out, and as you can see here, we just have fun, and we have so many extra bones that we can practice.
Right.
But what you see here, the pelvis and the sacrum with Diane in the background, and the finished.
Yeah, that's all edge.
This is all edge, the one she dug up down in Savannah, who was a quarter horse, and his bones are.
Oh, he had
incredible.
Amazing finds, including an extra thoracic vertebra and set of ribs, and the malformation of C6, C7, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
Yeah.
Awesome.
He had fantastic stories to tell.
So we don't have the tools to build a stand yet. So we just got into the PVC party and we play around. Okay, so that's the story of how we all got started with the Learning Center.
Is there a name of the book on how to articulate a skeleton?
It's called the Moose Manual.
Yes.
The Moose Manual?
It's about articulating a moose, which is as close as you're going to get.
No, there's an ebook.
Oh, it's an ebook. That's right. The Moose Manual is a hard copy.
Yeah, Wendy, I have a PDF I'll send you to put up that's going to have a list of like links and.
Oh, great. That'd be perfect. Because
I'll try to remember to put that on there.
Yeah.
Okay. We can't see the chat or questions. Any questions on just how we got all this going?
Yeah, I'm monitoring the chat and the questions and giving them to you when I think it's appropriate. Oh, somebody needs to know what rearticulate means.
It means essentially put the bones back together. So the bones we have here are all apart. So to rearticulate is to reassemble the body of the horse with the joints together. So it involves drilling and screws and rods and glue. Lots of glue.
And a support system, which is really the toughest thing. I think I might have to learn to become a welder now.
Yes, yeah. And because also you're trying to do it anatomically correctly. It's not just plastering the bones together. We want them to go, in the way that they would pretty much be in the horse, minus the soft tissue, minus the muscles and all. So, okay.
All right.
Ready?
Yep.
Okay, so what we wanted to do today, if there's enough time.
Oh, we're going to just keep going. Don't worry about time.
Oh no.
Dear, don't say that to us.
Oh, yeah. I already know we're going to have you back, but, we don't have to stick it right. I don't even know what time it is. Just keep going.
Okay, so the Learning Center is set up with stories or collections. So the tables we have here are various stories. And what we wanted to just highlight today are some of those stories. These are 3 of them. And the first one, I think a lot of people already know about. This is Apollo. If anyone wants to pipe up on the chat, if they don't know about Apollo or they do or whatever, but we're going to talk about Apollo's story. He was a thoroughbred that we got the bones from. Then we have the story of skeletal maturation. Lots of people want to know about growth plates and when are horses mature, when can we ride them, when can we break them, what's going on with all that. And then this is a very important topic that's really coming out into the forefront just in the last really year or so, but
Yeah.
it's been investigated since early 20s, if not earlier. And it is originally known as the C67 malformation. Those are the cervical vertebra. One of the new terms is ECVM, and we'll explain all of that.
Okay.
So that's another really fascinating story that veterinarians should become more attuned to as well. So this is Apollo, and I'll try to be brief because the whole story of Apollo is on the website, on the Equus-Soma.com website. You want to talk a little bit about Apollo?
Go ahead.
Oh. Okay. So a friend of mine in Maine, her name is Eva McGuire, known her for a long, long time. She purchased Apollo, off the track thoroughbred. He had an owner in between the track and her. And she was looking for a low-level eventer, trail horse, you know, good companion. She fell in love with him when she went down to try him. And when she brought him home, within a week, he started to change his behavior. She kind of thinks he was maybe sedated a little bit when she tried him out, which is not a great thing. So she bought him in 2016. And there was up and down and all around trying to get him to settle. She did everything she could think of, all the good stuff, body work, shoes, teeth, saddle fit, groundwork. He had good days, he had bad days. And she documented just about everything about it. Mm-hmm. In the last, probably, so end of 2018 or 2017, going into 2018, she went away for a while, just about 6 days on a vacation. When she came back, as she puts it, she had a totally different horse. He'd become erratic in his behavior. He'd become aggressive, dangerous, and she did everything, again, that she could think of diagnostically to find out what was wrong with him. And again, the story is heart-wrenching. She's very open about talking about it all. So I got a call from her, got attached or contacted by her in October of 2018. And she decided, because of everything going on, she needed to euthanize him. It was a heart-wrenching decision for her, as it is for anyone. But she felt that it was the best for him, and for safety reasons. He was attacking other horses. She couldn't board him, she couldn't bring him home, all that. And of course she couldn't sell him. So she had him put down and she took him to the compassionate composting. And she knew about Petey, she knew what I was doing, and she said, Pam, he's there. I want to donate him to your learning center. I just would like to know if I can get some answers. All the diagnostics, they could not come up with anything that they felt would cause this behavior. So she said, will you dig him up? So last year,
he was only 8.
He was 8 years old. So last summer, when I was in Maine, I dug him up. And Diane didn't help with the dig, but she was up soon after to help me pack bones up. I got his bones cleaned up enough that we could examine them, and we were pretty surprised. We're going to show them to you in a minute. At first, Eva did not want to see the bones. She just wanted to know if we found anything. But when I started describing to her what we found, when I was about to head back down here, she came over to see them. Diane was with me then, and yeah, we're going to start crying again. She was so brave. I mean, can you imagine going into the garage and seeing your horse's bones laid out, a horse you love so much? But she was awesome, and she told us more stories. We showed her what we thought was his problems, and she took some pictures with her cell phone, and that night she posted it on her private Facebook page. And that post went viral. Within 24 hours, there were like 15,000 shares all over the world. I got friend requests from 300 some people, and we got, I don't know how many messages asking if we would dig up their horses. So it kind of went crazy, and I told her that we would do a full examination and a report, essentially, and write all about them. So people immediately started drawing conclusions that were totally off base. And I had to kind of squash that energy for a while. So I started a private group. And then slowly, very, very slowly, we examined the bones. I took pictures, and I wrote up in parts, which again, you'll see on the website, and it's quite involved on what we found in his bones. And I used peer-reviewed publications and research. That was what took quite a while. That's something that I am very passionate about. is not just speculating on things. There's too many questions and too many ifs, ands, or buts. But when you have papers, publications that show pictures of the exact thing you're looking at and talk about it, then that's what I used as references. So anyways, that's...
And it was quite an education for us too, because neither one of us had ever seen this particular
so we want to see it. We want to know. I don't know this.
We're going to keep you waiting on the edge of your seat.
Wait a minute. Okay. So, hi.
We're back.
Okay.
You
So,
want to get his regular.
Okay, there he is. So what we found in a nutshell, let's see here.
Show the bottom side of these two sacrums.
This is where we think it all started. Everything's in reverse, guys, so it's kind of hard to... All right. So this right here is a normal, quote unquote, normal sacrum in the horse. It consists of 5 fused vertebrae, fused not quite at birth, we're finding a little later after that. And each one of these is a spine to the sacral vertebra. The very first sacral vertebra is modified to join up with the pelvis. So this is where your SI joint would be, in this area here. Oops, you see it there. Yes, here and here. And notice that this is pretty symmetrical, okay? So the wings, these are called the wings of the sacrum. The wings are pretty symmetrical on this horse. So then we pulled out the sacrum of...
Move it that way so they can really see.
Apollo. All right, so
There we
notice right here, it looks like it's fractured.
And that's what everybody says.
That's
You
what
can almost see
everybody
it better from the bottom.
Yeah, so here's the normal.
Okay, keep going.
That whole
Got it?
line.
Yeah.
So
You
in a
have to tell
nutshell,
everybody else.
sorry?
You have to tell everybody else.
So this is not a fracture. Wrong side, yes, right here. This is actually what is known as a transitional vertebra. So the transition is the area between the lumbar area. Now a diagram, yeah. The lumbar area and the sacrum. So there's typically 5 to 6 lumbar vertebrae in front of this one, and then there's the 5.
Here, take 3 fused.
Okay. This is the rest. You see that? This is the rest of Apollo's, not the rest of, but the last 3 vertebrae of his lumbars. So notice then, this one right here that's partially fused, the genes when he was being developed in the womb couldn't decide whether they wanted to be a lumbar vertebra or a sacral vertebra. So it's both. It has characteristics of both, lumbar and sacrum, and that's why it's transitional. Okay. The main thing that's important about this is the asymmetry. Major asymmetry in these 2 sides, and this is again where it connects to the pelvis. Your sacroiliac junction, your SI joint, the joint through which pretty much every motion from the hind end goes through on its way forward. And as we move our way forward from that into the lumbar area, so he has... Is that the rest of it?
That's the rest of him.
Okay.
But the rest of his lumbar spine.
That's the lumbar
actually,
and part of his thoracic.
The lumbars are the ones that have these transverse processes.
Right.
These up here are his last of his thoracics. So he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lumbar, and whether this one or not was number 6, that's your opinion. Okay, the last 3 are fused, and this is not atypical, okay? The last vertebra of the lumbars have actually 3 junctions. They have 2 transverse, and then they have the joint that's the main disc area. What happens is these will fuse in older horses, and he was only 8 years old. But not only did they fuse here, but he's fused up higher. Let's see.
Articular.
These right here. These are the articulating processes that should,
Yeah, they should look like that.
hold on, I'm gonna pull it off. Let me pull this one off too. Okay, they should be like this. Okay. So these on his last three were fused. They can't do that. Also notice the asymmetry. Asymmetry is the word of the day here. When you look down from the top,
Right.
it is. Notice how crooked the spines are.
Oh, yeah.
Go off that way.
Yeah.
Okay, so our assessment, and we are not veterinarians, we don't diagnose, we do that whole spiel. Our assessment from what we're learning and what we found and what we've read about is that his problem started at birth. It started with this sacrum not being developed properly and was asymmetric, and that asymmetry then passed on up through the rest of the body as he compensated through his life. The other thing that's interesting is these first lumbars, vertebra, that do come apart, but they also have, let's see if you can see it. Right.
Wow.
See the cracks?
Yeah.
That's a stress fracture. So within the joint, there was stress on the joint causing it to fracture, and this particular fracture goes down into the spinal column area.
Well, the whole thing is the dorsal process looks really.
Well, a lot of this is processing. It's dried out from the processing.
Yeah, but it's not straight.
No.
And the distance on the facets from the transverse processes looks very asymmetrical as well.
It's hard to hold.
I know.
Yes. So there in essence was some of the problem.
Full screen.
He also has
Hang on, somebody's asking, but you are full screen. Yeah, I mean, you are full screen as far as I can tell, because I've got spotlight on you. So it might be the individuals. Yeah. So I did get a question about this, and I think I might just handle it. Somebody said, well, how do we know it's not from his racing career? But that type of development, when you see that the very distinct difference on the two sides of the vertebrae, that's at birth. That's how they were created. And I have seen other skeletons with thoracolumbar. I have a pony skeleton where it has a rib on one side and a lumbar vertebrae on the other side of the same vertebrae with a rib. So this is not an injury. This is from, like I say, from birth.
It is genetic. In this particular situation with the sacrum, they also call it a sacralization of lumbar 6 is other terminology, is found in other breeds, especially in dogs. It's actually quite common in inbred dogs. And people can have this too. This is the first time we've seen anything like this with a horse in our collection. Although we picked up 3 more when we were up at the compost pile.
Well, and the interesting thing, I think, from a lot of this, from the standpoint that Eva had done so much diagnostics and trying to figure out what was wrong with him, that so much of this is really not diagnosable by your average radiograph or ultrasound. I mean, for one thing, they probably wouldn't be looking for it, but so much of it is so deep that unless you were at a university and able to use, I don't know if an MRI would pick up something like this, but it's not something that would ever be found.
Well,
right. It would be very difficult to be able to get the right angle on that. And it's so fascinating to see how the rest of the lumbar spine has tried to compensate for that.
Well, and his thoracics continued to try and compensate and paid the price as well. And Pam's got the radiographs from that.
Yes. So this is T18, 17, and 16.
Right.
So they're the ones that don't fall on the floor.
And somebody said nuclear scan would be the only way to diagnose that. And,
that only shows uptake. It doesn't show specifics about what's wrong. Like, I think it would show maybe an inflammatory process.
Yeah.
This can be diagnosed, seen with rectal ultrasound. They have to know what they're looking for.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the thing is, it's not something you would even begin to suspect. And he had a racing career, is that right?
He didn't race.
Okay.
But, but he went to the track to train to race.
Right.
And we'll get into that with the growth plates. The body's not mature. Those bones are not mature to be doing that stressful kind of work that they do. Plus, live in a stall. That's a soapbox, Wendy.
Yep. Here, we're doing good. Keep going.
That's right.
When you see the sacrum with the growth plates, and then you think about it being asymmetrical like this,
that's an eye opener. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But just to continue on with the asymmetry that continued up through Apollo's axial skeleton, this is the first lumbar. So you see the wings. And so T18, the thoracic vertebra, for those of you who are in Anatomy 101, are different from the lumbar. The thoracics carry the ribs. So the ribs aren't attached here, obviously. So thoracic 18, 17, 16. Now notice the hole.
Yeah.
Okay. So he had kissing spine. They're not fused yet, but they're severely damaged throughout this area. There's even on this side, he's got impinging going through there. So I'm going to take us to screen share for a minute and show you the x-ray of that.
Okay.
Because Eva did have that x-ray. And unfortunately, the veterinarians, let's see, stop. Let's see, I go up top, right?
Yep. Or down the bottom. Screen share is the little green arrow at the bottom in the middle.
Sorry, I'm going backwards again. Okay, here we go. Get me out of the way. All right, can you see it?
Yep.
All right, so that top, this is the x-ray. This is the vertebra I just showed you.
Yep.
1716 with this nice elliptic hole. And this is where it shows up in the x-ray. And then here again is this impinging part. So it's difficult because with all the diagnostics that vets have at their hands, they do the best they can trying to pinpoint issues. But until you see the actual bones, you really, you're missing out on certain things. And apparently the vet who took this, she didn't think it was severe enough to cause his issues. So,
wow.
Yeah,
that's what we said. Wow, that's a pretty severe kissing spine.
That's pretty severe kissing spine.
Yeah.
So with that, the other thing about the kissing spine area is that there's ligaments. There's the supraspinous ligament that goes over the top, and then there's the interspinous ligaments that go between the spines. They are highly innervated, highly innervated. I've got some really good publications that show the morphology of the nerves that are in that area. Many of the nerves are proprioceptive. So we often get the question about surgery, during the surgery for the kissing spine, and we shudder. It's you're hindering the support system of the horse, and you're cutting into those nerves that can no longer tell the horse's back, tell the brain what's going on with it.
And B, you're not really addressing why the horse had kissing spine in the first place. Why did he lose stability of his back, and why was his back in extension?
Yeah.
Do you have any guess at the percentage of horses that are born with severe abnormalities? I hate to call it abnormal because there's individual variation. I mean, the one thing I learned about anatomy is individual variation is your backup word.
We don't have a normal horse in the bone room.
Yeah. How many horses do you have in the bone room?
Parts of 20.
About 25 pieces parts.
Right.
Mostly axial skeletons, because that's the part that really fascinates me. And we're trying to kind of pinpoint or focus our research, and especially now with Apollo, he has opened up some big doors for us.
Right.
And a lot of questions. There's a lot of people out there. The good thing about this whole thing is so many people came out of the closet and said, I've got a horse just like this, and we thought he was naughty. And he's not. He's in pain. So
right. And that's so important that's one of the things I keep trying to get across to people is that when there's a behavior problem, there's a balance problem. And the balance problem here is that the bones can't do their job.
Yeah.
And so you have behavior problems. But, you know, this is, so many people think, well, anatomy is written in stone and this is the shape of things and the way it is. Exactly. And the minute you start to compare two skeletons, just two,
Yeah.
you know, or two bones, you start to realize that we're all so unique. I mean, I've come across students that don't have the upper part of the sternum. The ribs actually attach communally down halfway down the chest. You know, like I had to work with that rider. And so, you know, I always kind of ask people if there's anything they want to tell me before
share with us.
yeah, but that's the thing is people tend to believe that, you know, what's written in the book is what it is. And the book is only an illustration of the concept. It is not what's happening in life. And I think that this is a beautiful story to illustrate the fact that this isn't a result of training. This isn't a result of, you know, human intervention. Compounding the problem, yes, because we attempted to do something with the horse, but the horse innately had an issue that ultimately was the cause of all of it.
Well, the other little caveat of that, however, is that the research is showing that this and the C6C7 malformation that we have here is actually a result of, it's genetic, it's an inbreeding issue.
So in the end, it really is human caused, you know, by our breeding practices, looking for specific types of traits and ending up with things that we weren't wanting and not really knowing that we have those.
Well, I think that's the piece, is that we're only now starting to understand the C6, C7 malformation in the past, and for me, 5 years maybe since I started hearing about it.
You first published in 2014.
Yeah, so 6 years. And so, you know, you can't do anything about something you don't know. Right?
Yep.
And
that's what we want to do, is bring awareness. You know, it's so impactful for people to see these bones and to be able to pick these bones up, and I don't know, there's something about it that really hammers it home, and I think it changes people's viewpoint in a hurry, and that's what we really like to do.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, is it's all about awareness. And if we don't know, we don't know. You know, I often talk about what I call benign abuse. People don't go out intentionally trying to abuse their horse. They just don't know enough, and they're on a certain track.
I think the vast majority of people really want to do the right thing. They try their absolute best, and it's so hard to get to the bottom of things.
Right. Or they just lack the information. It's just not available. And that's, anyway, we could go on, but let's go on with your talk, because that was such a fascinating story, and I know you have more.
Like I said, the full story is on the Equus-Soma.com website. Just go up and navigate, and you'll find your way through Apollo's stories. And just, there's a lot of information there. Okay, so I'm going to go back to screen share. And there we go. Okay, so I did that. Okay, you want to talk about growth plates?
Yes, because somebody asked about that.
Okay. So this is a diagram that I assembled with information mostly from Dr. Deb Bennett, who's a fantastic person to follow as far as anatomy and genetics and reading. She's amazing. And so this is the rate of when the growth plates, quote unquote, close in the horse's skeleton. So what do we mean by close? Well, I'll show you when we show you the bones. I'll describe what that process is with the cartilage that is ossifying in between that's actually the plate and the end of the bones. But in essence, what this shows you, if you look down, things mature or close faster lower down in the horse. When the horse is born, the coffin bone is pretty much fused at birth and ready to go. Here it gives your timeline. The knee bones are the ones that the thoroughbred racing industry looks at. And they will x-ray them, and they will look for the evidence of what are called physes or epiphyses, which means that they're not totally fused. If they don't see the epiphyses, it means they're fused, and they go ahead and start them on their training program. But they may be fused, but as we go higher up, these bones are not. So the humerus, the shoulder bones, 3 to 3.5 years, scapula. Again, we go up on the hind legs, femur, 3 and 3.5 years, the pelvis, 3 to 4 years. Sorry, you're bringing bones over.
Bringing a femur and a tibia.
But what really strikes us is the fact that the very last bones to fuse, or the joints to fuse, the growth plates to fuse, are found in the neck bones, the cervicals, and the thoracics. And according to Deb Bennett, the very last to close are at the junction of the neck and the thorax. So that's a very important place.
Right.
Okay. So just keep this in mind. So neck and thorax, anywhere from like 5.5, sometimes a little longer, years. Okay, keep that in mind while you're starting your young 2-year-old. Okay, so we have here, Ivana, you want your chair? Don't drop it.
Don't drop it because it might fall apart. So we'll put it upright. This is a femur.
This is the femur. Oh, we should go get a mature femur.
Well, the bottom will fall off.
This is a 2-year-old. Okay, a 2-year-old thoroughbred, or at least
bring a big femur.
It won't go on the camera. It's the only one we have over there. Okay, so this is the femur. So this is the part that's up at the hip, right?
Oops, sorry, rattled the table.
Diane has. Oh, it's the humerus.
Wait a second.
That is the only femur.
You're just testing it. That's all. You're just
That
testing
is the only.
Let's see. People are having problems with full screen, but I got you. I have you on Spotlight. I'll just redo it because you should be on the screen. Okay. Hopefully that solved it. All right, keep going.
Okay, Rick. Should I take my chat off? Will that give more of a screen?
You can try it.
All right.
I'm not sure.
I'm trying to balance bones. All right, how do I do this chat?
If you go up to the top, there's a little down arrow and it says close.
Does that help?
There we go.
Does that help at all?
It didn't change at my end.
Okay, well, we got bigger here. We're happy. Okay, can we continue?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, anyways, this is a femur of Boo was 18 years old. So this is, oh God, it's heavy.
Like a draft.
Yeah, big bone. But see how the ends of the bones are all attached, right? There's no spaces. Nothing's falling off. Good and solid. Okay. So here is that same bone. I'm a 2-year-old. Right? So this space in here, this is where the growth cartilage is on long bones. And all of that, it's not a here today, gone tomorrow, or here today, mature tomorrow. It's a long process. It's an involved process. And if you go into any bone textbook and read about the development, it's pretty mind-boggling of all the different cells in here. There's bones, there's bone, old bone being broken down, new bone being formed, and specific cartilage cells, bone cells, yada, yada, and hormones and all kinds of things going on to direct this process. So essentially the growth plate, the term, is that layer of cartilage. It's not this. This is not the growth plate. This is the epiphysis. So in the 2-year-old horse that's on the track, starting off the start gate, this is not attached to the bone. The other end as well, which
is the hip.
Is the hip. All right, so this little round bone right here goes up into your hip joint, and it is, again, not attached. So these are the long bones of the same 2-year-old. That's the tibia.
Yes, this is the tibia. So this is where your stifle, your meniscus sit on the top of that, and this whole, it's held on by dental floss, really high tech. This whole piece comes off. So.
Okay, so now.
So these two bones join together at this end, and neither one of them have pieces that are attached.
Yeah.
That's
very unstable. Very unstable. And you think of the process of horses moving, galloping, that soft tissue is moving around too. And this is the mind blower. Okay. This is the sacrum of the 2-year-old. It has rubber bands because if I take them off, they'll all fall apart, which I can do.
Yeah.
I can put them back together again.
So is there a difference in breeds in terms of maturing?
Not according to Deb Bennett. Maybe size. The larger horses with longer necks might take longer, but typically this is an overall. So I don't know if you can see the table here, but I just took,
Yep, now we can.
there's the sacrum of the two. Okay, all these little guys right here, these are the little physes. Join them, and the only two that are fused are the first and second on the sacrum.
And in Apollo, that wasn't.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And this again is I think it's probably more of a coming 2-year-old, but still in the racing industry, they'd be backing them at 18 months and working them.
Well, in the quarter horse industry, you know, in the reining and cutting, they're starting those horses really early. And
the pelvis, which is actually in the back of the room of this horse, is also not fused. So remember, the sacrum is where it attaches to the pelvis. So you have these bones floating around on a pelvis that's floating around, and they're galloping sets, and they're charging out of start gates or doing quick rein stops.
And it's not so much that horses aren't able to get up and start galloping and running when they're right out of the womb. It's the idea that there's weight on their back and that they're, you know, making these quick starts and stops with that weight on their back and not under really their own, when they would want to. They're being required to do these things.
All right, and so so that's
when you add velocity and force, you up the yeah. I did have one question from someone while you're doing that. Someone wants to know, when do face bones fuse?
Well, they really never do.
They really don't.
They remain mobile. That's why the craniosacral system works in craniosacral therapy, is that we're able to endo and exo-rotate with paired bones and flex and extend the single bones. And that remains. That's how the cerebral spinal fluid is able to have its rhythm and flow through the central nervous system.
And the sutures are fascial, so
right, sure,
how they move. That is a debate though, because I believe when I was taking the craniosacral course, our instructor Sandy was telling us how, I think it was her, how the medical books still say that the human skull fuses like 2 years old. But the osteopaths and the craniosacral people don't believe that. And I've got skulls here from newborn, 4 months, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 12, and then older horses, and they're still the bones. Some of the sutures are disappearing, and that's a lot of that I'm told is when they're composted in the process.
Okay, so based on your knowledge and information from these bones, what do you recommend in terms of an age for starting a horse?
Yeah, we get that all the time. Diane?
5 would be great.
Yeah.
You know, because the thoracic spine is going to be fused.
So Sunig, in one of his books, which is an old text, says that they didn't start their horses until they shed their coat in their 6-year-old year.
Wow.
Yep. And if you look back, you will see that the idea of waiting and letting horses mature.
Well, and the thing is, I think a lot of people think that means just turning them out and doing nothing with them. But, you know, there's so much that you can do in hand, as Jillian Kreinbring is such an expert at, that, and there's other trainers that can do all of this work that by the time you actually do back them, they're so educated and they're so balanced.
And that's where I love the Linda Tellington Jones work, because there's so much about developing the curiosity and teaching the horse how to learn, so that it's a curious and engaged horse that's active in its process rather than just simply being told what to do.
Well, and there's have you had Warwick Schiller on for a webinar?
Not yet.
Well, he was on with Patrick King, I think, and was talking about all of the things that he used to do to get horses to do things, and then at some point realized that he had to do a lot of things to then get them over what he did to train them.
Yeah.
And he just has sort of become so much more enlightened and has changed his whole breaking process, so he doesn't have to undo some of the traumatic things that happen. And I just find that so fascinating and beautiful.
Yes, yeah, I met him in it was in New Zealand at Equidays, and you know, and we met and talked for a while. He's a really interesting guy, and you know, to his credit, to suddenly decide that he's going to change how he does it. The other person that's done that is I'm such a fan of is the gaited horse, Larry Weitzel.
Oh,
who rides gaited horses, and he was a Paso trainer. He is a Paso trainer, and he walked into his barn one day and he said, all my horses are unhappy, and he completely stopped showing, and he now teaches people how to gait in snaffle bits and saddles that fit with riders and balance. Delightful guy. He's in Tennessee. I should get Larry on as a guest. Yeah, I keep getting more ideas. So I do have one question that I think is kind of important, because somebody's saying, how are the horses not collapsing when the bones are so loose? But we're only looking at the bones. We're not, fascia, muscles. There's a lot of other structures that are keeping everything organized.
I mean, Mother Nature's got everything held together nicely while it matures. Is the fact that we humans want to sit on their backs and apply pressure and force perpendicular to the weaker areas at this time in their lives. You let them mature, you let the bones finally finish fusing, and then you do your work to build up those muscles that surround those areas. Because the back is not, the horse is not built by nature to be ridden, to carry weight. It's humans that want to do that. So for us to enjoy the riding and doing it to the benefit of our horses, we need to do these exercises that strengthen all those muscles. What opens my mind and others is when they see, this is the 2-year-old's, one of the neck vertebra, the cervical. This is C5, I think. But all of them are like this. So the head is in this direction, the tail's in this direction. So the cranial, that's the term for in the head direction, cranium, and caudal for the tail direction. So the growth zones on this particular vertebra, there's actually several around here, but you see I just pulled off the cranial one. So this is what people would call a growth plate. The growth plate is the cartilage here, but it's not fused. This is a physis, it's not fused yet. And again, in the cranial or the caudal area, this one isn't. And they fit into each other. We have two together. Whoop. See, I can't even get them in anymore. 2-year-old.
This is a 3.
All right. This is the 3-year-old.
Oh, that's the 3-year-old. This is the 3-year-old.
So the 3-year-old now, this is C6 and C7. The cranial part right here is now fused. It still has a line. If you were close up, you could see it, where mineralization is probably still occurring. But the caudal piece, the caudal physis, is not yet attached. And this is 3-year-old. And this is all the way through the spinal column. On the 3-year-old, this is T5, so in the withers. So you can see how long the spine is down to the vertebral body. And this little Mickey Mouse guy right here, that's the physis. Okay, and the ears of Mickey Mouse here and here are where the ribs attach.
Right.
So you get forces coming down from above. This is a 3-year-old that we're getting ready for a young event horse. Right? I won't get on that soapbox, but just think about it. They have them going prelim level at 5 years old. So how early did they start them? But you get those forces coming down on this area that's not yet fully stuck together, essentially. And you're also affecting the ribs. And as my osteopath friend would say here, you're affecting the diaphragm, the liver, all the visceral organs. So that's 3-year-old. Now people are asking 4-year-old. Here's a cervical of a 4-year-old. So the cranial is pretty well attached here. But still, the caudal piece isn't.
Wow.
Okay, 4 years old. Now, 5 years old, this is the C6 of a 5-year-old, and we're nice and firmly fused in the cranial piece. The caudal piece is as well, but there's still a line. See the line?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the last part of the mineralization process of fusing. So it is stuck there, but there still is more that has to be done. This is a 5-year-old. So what are you looking for?
Well, and just the fact that this Frisian was 10,
10,
right? And
yeah.
he still is not completely fused for
This
whatever.
is a 10 years old T1, you can see right here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So we kind of have a theory.
Okay.
That we, you know, bottle of wine, we come up with some great ones. Scotch.
Scotch
Scotch.
talk.
If anyone out there has a horse who's between 5 and 7, 8 years old, who's never carried weight, never been ridden, for some reason that poor horse has to be put down, we would love to be able to look at spines of horses who have not been ridden in that time period when this is going on. Our theory is that the reason we're seeing this older horses with the mineralization line still not fully formed or fused is perhaps, since we're on these horses' backs at 2, 3, 4, we are actually slowing down the process. Does that make sense? So I would like to see those horses that have never had carried weight at 7 years old and see if they have these, if the process is complete. So.
Yeah, no, it would be very interesting to be able to have, you know, and that's one of the things Bob Belker, he's got this whole group of feet that he can look across all the feet. They're the same breed doing the same thing to sort of come up.
You do a study.
Right. And so like here, to be able to have a horse that's never been sat on and just look through each year group. Yeah, that would be so interesting.
That'd be very interesting. Yeah. So, but for the time being, we like to, you know, educate people to come and see this. When people come and see this, because again, I've got it on the website, I've got a page about growth and I've got pictures and all that, but 3-dimensional and having them in your hands, we've had a lot of people who have younger horses sort of take pause.
Yeah. So we're getting suggestions about the Chincoteague ponies or BLM horses.
Well, and believe me, we have considered that. That, you know, the Chincoteague ponies and some on some of the other barrier islands, that they do allow them to die and the bones just lay there. And I believe a field trip is in the future.
If we can get permission,
yeah. I mean, even to just observe, it's not, we wouldn't even have to collect, but just to be able to look and observe would be beneficial.
Yeah.
So, did you have something you wanted to say there?
Nope, I was just picking these up
Pick them up. Okay. So that's kind of a brief
overview of the growth
plates.
This is a nice segue into.
Yes, it is a nice segue into.
Yep. Let me just see if we have any other questions. Okay. Keep going, because those are questions about other things, and I'll get to them.
Trying to find my mouse. Oh, for heaven's sakes. All right, forget it. Mouse just took a vacation. Okay, I'm gonna go back to, I'm getting pretty good at this.
Yeah.
All right. Now, here is our ECVM story. So this is, you drink of water for this one.
Yeah.
This is a very, very important story because we are finding it in the bones we're collecting. And more we're seeing horses in bodywork sessions presenting with symptoms that could very well be showing up because of this. So we've taken a couple to one of our local vets here who's actually done x-rays and found the malformation on a couple of them. So what is it? ECVM, equine complex vertebral malformation, is the term that Sharon May Davis has given this syndrome. Originally in 2014, when she published the first of several papers on it, she referred to it as C6, C7 malformation. Sharon May Davis is an amazing anatomist researcher in Australia. I think by now, she'll probably correct me, but she's done over close to 2,000 dissections. So she's seen everything. And what she started noticing was that there was a change in morphology in an area. Shoot, I'm sorry, my mouse has decided it's gonna not play. My new mouse. There we are. Wake up. So this is just a lateral side diagram of the horse's neck bones, the cervical vertebra. There's 7 of them. Atlas axis C1, C2, C3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And then 7 joins the first thoracic, which is your junction of the neck and thoracic area in your thoracic sling. This is all behind the scapula, so it's hard to get to and hard to see. But in dissection, she can see a lot. So she found that this syndrome not only was C6, C7, but also can be found in the first and second ribs, and the muscles, the nerves, and the blood vessels that attach here. Whoop. All right, this means we need to go to the bones. All right. And then guess what we're going to talk about next, if you want us to. we're gonna join. Uh-oh. Okay. So, well, I'm sorry. Shaking the table.
Okay.
Just to put it in perspective, we need to just a real quick anatomy, of course.
There we go.
All right. Can you see that? Okay.
Yep.
All right. So what we're looking at is the ventral or the bottom of the neck bones. The underneath, right? You have to crawl under the horse and look at it.
There we go.
Okay.
There we go.
And the atlas is not here up top. The first one we have here is the axis. So C2, C3, 4, 5, C6, and 7. And we're just showing this. This is normal. This is actually Apollo. Normal in that, notice that C5, C3, 4, and 5 are, this is how they look. There's bat wing shape, kind of convex area in here. But notice C6 has these two ridges. I'm going to go sideways. So see these ridges here?
Mm-hmm.
They're the same length in Apollo, which is what they should be in a normal horse. They're fundamental as anchor points for muscles that come all the way down through the neck and into the thoracics. I'm going to pull it apart so we can have just C6 and 7. Okay, so we now have 6 and 7. I'm lined up here. Right, so here's 6 and 7. See, 7 goes back to being like bat wing shape with two little tubercles in the middle, but it's symmetrical. So what Sharon started finding was that these ridges in some horses in C6 were missing, or parts of them were missing. Which one did you get? No, let's do this one. This is not C7. So here's the C6. You gotta let us know if you can't see, okay?
Yep.
All right. I'll let Diane do the C6.
Okay.
Right, so
there's a.
this is the C6. Notice this area right in here.
So confusing.
See how it's like missing?
So hold
Yes,
that.
that's
Show.
what I was wondering about.
Yeah. Okay, the tag is not helping us any.
There we go.
Okay, so
Diane, if you lower yours down a little, the black, there we go. Now we have black background. So
Okay.
you can back up a little bit too, or the table can back up. It doesn't matter. Okay, so
No,
this
that's
is what
good.
she was finding is that, there we go. This part, it's called the caudal part of the ridge, the tubercle, is missing on some of the horses. It's still normal, turn it a little bit, on the other side.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
right, you have it on one side, but not the other.
Exactly. Excuse me. So the terminology is such that this whole part of the side, the transverse part of the vertebra, is called the transverse process. And in the C6, the transverse process actually has 3 branches. The transverse part, the cranial part, and the caudal part. We should do that on the same side. The caudal part. So caudal, cranial, remember, to the head, caudal to the tail, and then this part is the transverse. So what's missing in these C6 is the caudal part, which is this side. Whoop. I know this is terrible. Right here.
Yeah.
And where Diane's point is missing. So she would call this the caudal ventral tubercle is missing. So what does that mean? that's one variation. There's several variations of the syndrome. So C7 in this horse is normal, somewhat. Still looks bat-shaped, all right? Wings. The two tubercles in the center are not quite equal symmetrical, and that probably is significant for muscle attachment. But the question then is, where do the muscles attach? Right? And notice also the twist.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's actually, Diane, can you point that out? You can look at the bones while you do it. There you go.
This to here.
Let's see how this is all twisted.
This is twisted off to the side. Should be straight.
So think of muscle attachment, think of nerves, think of vascular, think of all those things. This is what she would call a unilateral C6. So only one side is missing the tubercle. C7 is essentially normal. Again, that's a variation on the theme. Then we have another variation where we also have the unilateral here. So this is C6. And we're missing one side again, but this time in C7, that tubercle is formed. So the normal C7, see the difference?
Yeah. Yeah, it looks really weird.
Yeah, so in this case, it's much easier to do in live in person, isn't it?
That's right, you're doing great.
Everything is ass backwards, frankly.
Yeah.
Come on, I'm trying to get the bones kind of when they dry, they don't want to assemble. So here we have then.
So you can really see the asymmetry that this ridge is really leading off to the side where that transposition.
So this is called a unilateral transposition. So the caudal part of this tubercle in the developmental stage, the genes, again, are guilty, didn't form on C6 like it should have. It formed the ridge on C7.
Wow.
So now the muscles have to attach somewhere else and everything that goes with it.
Right.
Okay, so that's another variation. These both are left or right-handed, I think. They go back and forth, depends on what you get. Where? Yeah, so just to move it on. So now we're going to look at our Frisian. This is the Frisian we saw on one of the earlier slides at the compost that we dusted them off in 15 minutes. Is 5 with it? Yes. So I'm pulling the Frisian's neck bones out of the compost, and one at a time. And I'm starting up at C1, and I'm working my way down. Lights. We'll go back to the table. Anyways, so I pull out C5, and here's C5. Batwing. Good. That's good. That's normal. I pull out C6. Batwing. Oops. C5, C6. They're nearly identical.
I was going to say they look like they're the same thing.
Yep, and I counted 10 times before I realized that this is really C6.
I can see why you would have to have those labeled.
So here is, I have it tickled, C7. C7 has both of the ridges.
Wow.
Transposed. Which one is C6? It's backwards. There we go. All right. So this one is a bilateral transposition. So those ridges, the caudal tubercles that should have been here on 6, are now been transposed during development onto 7. And even this one is not all that fully formed.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a lot straighter, though, in the way it's presented.
Right.
The base of the neck wouldn't have as big of a twist in it as the ones that had a unilateral.
And there's other features that I won't go into right now. Changes in the vascular pores or frame in the openings where they go through or show up.
How old was this horse when he died?
10. And he did not present behavioral-wise, which the ones with the unilateral often will have behavioral issues. But we also feel that he was more of a backyard guy and was lightly ridden and enjoyed by his owner. So he really wasn't pushed. I think if he had been pushed farther, like into dressage and all, he probably would have started to complain.
Well, especially given then what you found in addition.
So we'll continue on. Now we're going to go as to why the C6, C7 malformation became ECVM, because Jeremy Davis realized that it isn't just the C6 and C7 that has the malformation. The first rib, these are normal first ribs of another horse. And they're nice and short. These are the ones, the entrance to the thoracic area. The bottom parts attached to the manubrium of the sternum. The important muscles that attach to the first rib are the scalenes.
Oh my gosh, there's all sorts
of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, these are normal, same symmetry. So I pulled out the ribs of Warrior, who's our Frisian here, and this is his right rib, and this is his left rib. Yeah,
exactly.
I have my skeleton in the picture here. Yes, this is not broken. This is what is called first rib syndrome, and it goes along with the malformation. You don't find this, apparently, according to Sharon, in horses who have normal C6 and C7, but it is found, and she wrote a paper on it. All these publications I have on a list. Actually, if you go to the Equus-Soma website, the navigation says references, and on that page are references to all of this and Apollo. And many of them are PDFs that you can just click and look at. So this is then part of that syndrome, is the first rib malformation. So again, where are things attaching? The scaling muscle that attaches here doesn't attach here. And what she's found in dissection is there'll be a filament coming down from the missing rib, and it attaches either the first or second. She finds all kinds of variations in this thing.
Wow. Reminds me of that woman without missing the upper part of her sternum. It's like freaky.
The interesting thing is this horse that Diane is one of Diane's not only clients but a good friend. Excuse me, young lady. You can tell about
well,
right side.
He was an off the track thoroughbred that was purchased off the track as a 4-year-old, I believe, and he was relatively normal to ride, you know, kind of active and full of himself, but he did start to be a lower level eventer as a 5-year-old and seemed to be progressing sort of. He had a little bit of time off because he had a small lameness issue, I think, and after that time off, he became dangerous. He's a little bit reminiscent of Apollo. You know, he would have a look in his eye and it didn't matter really what you were asking him to do, or even if you just wanted to catch him, he really got difficult to handle. And of course, a lot of diagnostics were done and SIs were injected and various rehab protocols were followed, and nothing really changed his attitude. And so over this period of probably a year and a half, Pam and I are learning more information and gathering more bones. And I finally told the owner, I said, you know, Pam and I will pay for him to have this radiographic protocol for C6, C7, which is a specific protocol that most vets don't know about or do. And so we contacted our local vet and we took bones in, and Pam brought her research papers from Sharon May Davis and
bones.
Yeah. And we took the horse and we did find that he has bilateral C6. And so he's turned out in a lovely turnout situation for now. His attitude over the last year has deteriorated a bit more, which is apparently common as they age. I don't really know what the mechanism is, that they seem to get more and more uncomfortable with their asymmetry. And they can develop postures of really standing base wide or standing with one foot really far forward. I do his hoof trimming, and it's becoming more of an issue. So, you know, he'll get to live as a pasture ornament for as long as we feel like he's comfortable. And then he will probably end up on the compost pile, and we'll be able to, you know, see for ourselves what we saw the radiographs of. But Sharon, I believe, has found that 40% of the thoroughbreds that she's dissected have ECVM, which is a pretty high percentage.
Yeah.
30% of warm bloods. It's not just thoroughbreds. Warm bloods, quarter horses.
Yeah, Edge had ECVM. I forgot that. Along with,
as I understand it, it's horses that have thoroughbred blood.
Yeah.
You know, the genes have gotten mixed in, and so that leads me to ask one question. Do you think if someone is planning on purchasing a horse that's of fairly high dollar for a performance horse, then they should absolutely have an X-ray done at the base of the neck?
absolutely.
But not a typical, not the ones that vets are used to doing. They're used to doing a lateral view. And that's okay for looking at C6 usually to see if those caudal ridges are there. But the protocol that at first Sharon May Davis wrote a paper on, and just recently, and it's on my list, Dr. Christine Gee, who's works with Sharon in Australia, she's a veterinarian, has been doing some research, and she's just put out an excellent paper detailing the protocol for X-raying this area. And it has to be an oblique angle, and the horse has to be sedated and kind of stretched out so they can get into that area. But
Not a simple procedure.
yeah, and it's not something it's not on the vet's radar screen if they're not looking for that, because the views that they take are they're looking for arthritis in the AP joints, and they can see those kinds of things. They look for spacing in the disc. They're starting to become more and more aware of it because it's getting out there.
So we're looking at somebody's asked a question, and we're kind of looking at the difference between nature versus nurture. How much of this is genetic? How much of this is training? Now, obviously the genetic in that we've bred these horses without the awareness of what we've bred. And, you know, we've done that so many times with things where we go for one trait and then wind up with things that we never considered. But aside from that, just, you know, in a more general way, like if 40% of the horses have this anomaly, are we looking at primarily a genetic component that is compounded by training?
Well, according to Sharon May Davis, there are certain breeding lines that are passing this on. So purely genetic.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, in some of the research that Pam did, she found that this was common in Holstein cattle.
Yes. Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, that's where the CVM comes from, complex vertebral malformation. If you Google that or Scholar, you'll come up with all kinds of papers about Holstein cattle having this problem, and it was from breeding, and they solved it.
They did. It was fatal to their calves, and so it was very important for them to find out what was causing it, and they traced it to 3 bulls, and they eliminated those bulls from the gene pool, and it went away.
Wow, they're so much better about being able to do that in cattle, but the economics are so different.
Yeah.
Is there a specific side that you see the malformation more commonly?
I think Sharon said she calls it the right, unilateral right.
Yeah.
I'd have to take a survey of ours. It's kind of interesting that Diane likes to point this out is of our random collection of bones, we have it in about 40% of, and it's all different breeds.
Wow.
I've got an Appy, quarter horse Friesian, several thoroughbreds,
A couple of warm bloods.
Well, and Friesian's a closed book, so it's not like they've got thoroughbred in their blood, or at least they're not supposed to.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Well, and I guess we don't know if this guy was purebred or not, so that might be.
I have his breeding.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and so that is actually a place to look at certain things like Icelandic horses. There's nothing else no other blood that's going to show up in there for 1,000 years. But again, you know, to do those kind of studies requires a significant number of horses, a lot of time, and some funding.
Yeah. 1,000 horses, yeah.
Jillian Feinberg.
She told us we needed 1,000 horses. We're like,
I really think you guys should become a nonprofit so we can donate to you and get a tax write-off, okay?
I'll hit you up on how to do that.
I can talk to you because I've done it. I've done it for another organization. So we can talk about that, because the information that you're providing and is so important for horse people and needs to be supported. I mean, my webinars are for free. So it's like, it's not like, I can ask people to please donate to you, but please donate to them.
We're going to get a lot of emails donating their horses.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's what we get. Yeah.
So before we've been going for a while, but I know you have a really interesting story about Surefoot, and I'd really love to get to that before we conclude for today, because we're at an hour 45. But it's just, I mean, I'm trying to crawl inside of the bone room here. I'm like so close to my screen trying to, see what you're showing, and it's so fascinating. I obviously will have to have you back again for another adventure into the bone room, but I would really like, because somebody knows about that you were going to share this story. Somebody asked me about trigeminal. So yeah.
Right. Before I do, we do have kind of a little hit on Jillian.
Oh, good. Okay.
I'll one-upmanship on Jillian. We love Jillian, and her talk yesterday was fantastic, just wonderful. She actually, I'll go to share screen just real quick, and I'll make this quick.
Okay.
I'll come back. Okay, so she talked all about the hyoid.
Yes.
Right? All right. Last summer, I collected about 35 hyoid apparatus.
Wow.
We sell them.
Oh, wow. I want one with the magnets.
Talk about, no, you don't want to mess. So Jillian taught us how to do the magnets.
Oh, great.
Yeah, we've got a magnetized one, but they hang a little wonky.
We found a better way, if you can see right to the left.
Yeah.
So, hold on.
Because I have a skull.
Here comes our skull on a turntable.
It takes us off.
Oh, this is cool.
Okay.
You want to put it on?
Let's see if we go there, so we can bring the table up closer.
Oh, there we go. Maybe that'll work. Whoa.
So this is our turntable horse.
Easy.
That's really smart to put them on a Lazy Susan.
We have our hyoid apparatus. Swinging in the breeze.
Little teeny tiny screw eyes.
Screw eyes.
Oh, okay.
See that? Do we have another one that's an example? But you can see in the joints where she didn't have the serrated hyoid bone here. So
Right.
But they're just tiny little eye screws that Diane is very adept at drilling holes and gluing. And they attach to the stylohyoid, and you can see where it attaches again up here to the tympano. So there you go.
It's so amazing because you can really see how thin the bones are relative to the rest of the skull, and yet how important this whole system is to the overall proprioceptive and balance of the horse and everything we've been talking about, like the whole neck, everything. This is amazing.
The fact that it goes up so close to the balance system in the ear area is pretty phenomenal. So yeah, that's been one of our projects.
Wow.
We can go on.
Yeah, wow. People have said wow, okay? It's like really wow.
More hyoid stories at the next visit.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
So I know people are falling asleep now, right?
I don't think so. They're hanging in there. This is really fun.
Great, we appreciate it.
So while you're getting ready, somebody asked, what's the biggest aha moment you've had so far in your work?
I think Apollo. For me, Apollo's sacrum blew me away.
Yeah.
I had no idea. Okay, well, I'll move on. This is my pick, my same thing as Jillian showing the muscle attachments. All right, Surefoot pads. So briefly, Diane introduced me to them actually.
Because I got them from you, Wendy, when I came to and audited your clinic here in Aiken. I think I ordered them after I saw you use them and have used them in my bodywork practice. And Pam and I have a collection of horses here and in my house that we're doing various rehab protocols with. And so I had brought my Surefoot pads over here at some point, trying to figure out actually the other horse that we have that is very left front dominant. And we have had fantastic results with getting him to stop being so left front dominant, and I think Surefoot has had a big impact with that.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And I'm kind of a newbie. I don't do as much body work anymore, but I love to accompany Diane and be her handler and try and keep her from being killed or bitten. I learned so much watching her practice her osteopathy techniques. And when she pulls the pads out, I'm like, okay, what's this going to do? And just observing the horses on the pads and the ones that don't want to be on them or do or have different statues that they want to be just was fascinating me. So we started using them on some of the horses that we have in rehab. This particular one in the pictures is my little Connemara thoroughbred slash Irish sport horse, who, in a long and short story, she was born, they thought, with a club foot. She was bred by my sister. She's a family horse again, and she had a history of always being off. And so when she was about 10 years old, I think, 9 or 10, my sister shipped her down to me here in Aiken, and I thought I could do my wondrous body working, skills and craniosacral to help her become more straight and whatnot. Diane was doing a lot of the in-hand work with her, but she still had some issues. That's a side story. The thing that's interesting me is 2 or 3 years ago, she started having head shaking issues. She was apparently allergic to whatever pollen's down here. And if this is where I'd kind of like to try and get a video to run.
Oh yeah.
You have to, all right, file, share, right?
Yeah.
Okay, this is actually was a Vimeo video, so it's got dialogue and not dialogue and everything. So in essence, her name's Princess. I didn't name her, my sister did. She would present with, whenever she would lower her head to eat, the head would fly up, and you could tell she was just jerking her head around, that she was having nervous irritation whenever she'd lower her head.
Okay, so we're not seeing the video play just yet. I just want to check.
Not quite yet because it's, let's see.
Okay. And then once you start it, you'll probably have to unshare and reshare your screen, remember?
All right, I'll do that right now and get that kind of going here.
Yeah.
So you can't see it, right?
No, not yet.
So stop share and then reshare. Okay, and I'll see if I can get
There we go.
Got it?
Yep. And just if you turn the sound off on the video, then we'll just hear you.
Yeah, there is no sound.
Oh, okay.
In essence, what I've written here, she was demonstrating, and I felt this is when I was going through the craniosacral program, and we had just been doing cranial nerves, and I did my research and felt that what was bothering her was similar to humans with trigeminal neuralgia, which is an incredibly painful inflammation of the trigeminal nerves, and it's often called the suicide disease. So just watching this you'll see. Hopefully, just keep going. Yes, I know. It takes a bit. I gave people time to read it.
Okay, that's good.
Sneeze, snort, flicker head, all day long, grazing in the pasture and eating. And yes, we had teeth checked and all that. I actually had blood drawn for allergies, which came back after this. And she's allergic to a few things around here, not significantly. But see that is, and according to the human, trigeminal neuralgia is pain.
And do they know the cause in humans?
Oh boy, I don't know.
Well, I think they feel like it's some sort of nerve impingement, but
it's also inflammation of the nerve too. Yeah, not sure. So anyway, so I practiced my craniosacral techniques specifically on the cranial nerves, and I did 3 sessions with her pretty much within a 10-day period. Mm-hmm. And this next video is after that session. And you got to understand, this horse is grass hungry, and in front of her is a lane of lush grass, and behind her is our lawn. And
oh, how lovely.
So she stood here for a good 30 minutes, totally processing.
And it's interesting because she's swaying.
Yep. this is what she does on your surefoot pads. So
Well, that's what I was going to say, but this is a horse swaying that has never been on pads at this point.
Exactly. Right. Right.
And that's what I find fascinating, is that there's that same, so no one can explain the sway. You know, we see it in varying degrees, but it's fascinating for me to see the sway in this horse from the work that you did, not from surefoot pads. So that's really interesting. In addition to everything else that's interesting, okay?
So she finally comes out of it and she's like, okay, good to go. And she did not head shake for another year or so like that. And so I thought we were good to go. So I will stop this. And okay, so fast forward. So like a year ago, she started shaking again, but it was different. This time it wasn't when she lowers her head. It's up and down, up and down, up and down when her head is upright. And she literally, Diane saw her many times, she just go into kind of a quiet place all day long and not move and not eat, not graze, and just be quiet. And as soon as you'd start moving her, she'd start doing this again. Yeah. I did cranial sacral, and it would help. It would help for an hour, but it wasn't getting to it. So we started playing around with the pads, and I'm going to do one more little.
Someone's put in humans. Oops, I lost it. Hang on, it's in the chat. I can find it. In humans, it can be from impingement, from TMJ, muscle overdevelopment, etc., nerve damage, or inflammatory diseases. So it can happen from it looks like a variety of things.
Okay. All right. This is just a video I took to show the kind of motion that she was doing a little while ago. So this is it. She'd just be going around and just doing that. Doing all the time. And this video, she actually looks kind of okay, but when she would stand still for hours on end, she just looked miserable. Now I was starting to suspect she's gray, she has melanomas in her mouth, and I was starting to suspect something in the parotid. So I don't have any other videos, I just have the pictures.
Yeah, no, the pictures will be great.
Blah, 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 blah. Am I doing this right?
You're almost there.
Do you see that?
Nope.
Oh no! Here we go again.
You just have to go back to screen share, unshare, and then reshare on the right screen. That's all.
Yeah. I have to actually go back to you to Zoom. All right. Oh. There we go. And there. You see it now?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So so I started her on the pads. I got your physio pad first.
Yep.
And she had a specific way she wanted to stand on it. In fact, this is the first time she stood on it, and she actually cracked it.
Yeah.
On the edge. Yeah, right on the edge.
Yep.
But this is her quote unquote clubby kind of foot. It's a little bit high, and we were thinking she wants to really just kind of stretch these tendons out and all that. Anyways, she stood here for 45 minutes, just like this, swaying. I do a bit of swaying back and forth, shifting every now and then I'd take her for a walk. And after 2 or 3 days of doing this, like every other day, and every day she stood on it just like this. Wow. Then I huge, beautiful Frisian stretch out of her.
I know that stretch is such an amazing photo. I'm so glad you got it.
Great photo.
Yeah, because she's a squat little plump thing, you know? So we were like, whoa, she looked like this. I'm trying to keep this story short. But anyways, I continued on with the pads, and I got your square ones, and I got the wedge ones. And she would stand on the same thing for the longest time in different ways, in different positions. And then I'd take her for a walk, and she'd start doing the head shaking thing. Then finally, she kind of stopped, and she didn't want to get on the pads again for probably a week or so. If I just offered them to her, and if she stand on them, she'd step right off. And
how was the head shaking at this point?
Gone.
Wow.
And so a few days ago, she came in and she was starting to do it again. So I brought her out and I offered the pads. She stood on all four pads again for 30 minutes. It's like, I need this fixed.
Wow.
Now, I know this is anecdotal, but we'll just go with it.
There's been such marked changes in her demeanor throughout all this,
Yes.
because she really is a grass-hungry little pony, and to see her standing in the stall, like trying to stay as unstimulated as possible, we really were sort of thinking, what is going on?
Yeah, you can see her ribs here. She lost a lot of weight because she wasn't grazing during the day.
Right.
My guys are turned out 24/7. They have a choice to, do it. So if there's time you want, Diane has a really interesting client story.
Oh, great. Do you want to unshare the screen so we can see Diane?
The roar. Was that a pad one?
Oh, no, that wasn't a pad one.
Oh, sorry, that wasn't a pad one.
Yeah. I do have an interesting client story. That was a horse that came to me through my barefoot trimmer, and I took my Surefoot pads to this horse that she was rehabbing his feet. It was an off-the-track thoroughbred that had we talked about this in the very beginning, maybe before we came on, about having the surgery for impinging dorsal spinous processes.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So this horse had 9 of his thoracic dorsal spinous processes shaved, so they would no longer be kissing. And he has divots in his back where you can see where they went in arthroscopically and shaved these bones. And he had these horrible, thoroughbred feet with the underrun heels and the long toes, and he was pretty much crippled. He stood on like an elephant stand all the time with his hind legs up underneath him and his front legs up underneath him. And so by the time I went to see him and took my Surefoot pads, the barefoot trimmer had been working with him for maybe 8 months, and he had grown out he was almost grown out his first hoof capsule. So he was a lot more comfortable on his feet, but his body was so stuck. He just seemed so brittle to me. I quite frankly was afraid to do much more than myofascial release because he couldn't hardly stand. I don't even know how she trimmed him. So I had brought my Surefoot pads, and I'm like, let's do a session and just see how he'll like these. And I wished I had taken video, because
I know that feeling.
It's one of those things that he pretty much just stood on her back patio. He struggled having his hinds on the wedges at first, but gradually, as he would rest a foot, I would slide one up underneath there, and then he would step down on that foot and rest the other hind foot, and I'd slide the other wedge, and pretty soon he was standing on those. And initially, he wouldn't stay long, and we would walk him in a circle around the backyard and bring him back up. And I would say after about 10 minutes of that, he's like, okay, I'm in. And he just stood on them. And so I left my Surefoot pads with her for 2 weeks, and she ended up buying her own set. And we have used them with him over the last few months. And honestly, he's a different horse. Between the hoof care, the body work, and the Surefoot pads, he's a different horse. That's all I can say. He just is so much more comfortable in his body. He doesn't seem like he's brittle and going to break apart. And there's times that he actually stands square like a normal horse.
Wow.
So,
And that's the thing, is Surefoot pads are just a piece of this puzzle, and the foot care and the body work and the training, they all need to be in support, where the Surefoot pads are just another piece to bring in that awareness. But I just love that story.
They're so lovely and non-invasive. They give the horse the choice, and with a horse that to me looked like he was so uncomfortable in his body, to be able to have the choice of which ones I want to stand on for how long. It felt really like the right thing to do.
Yeah. And there's 2 sides to our coin. The learning center is one side, but having horses that we're doing kind of a rehab, I call it whole horse reboot, because we get horses who pretty much have PTSD or some behavioral issue or whatever. And our protocol is that, and the owners have to agree, is the shoes come off, barefoot trim, they're off grain, they're 24/7 out. We do body work. They're not ridden. Diane does in-hand stuff. I'll do cranial, she'll do her osteopathy, and now we got the Sure pads added in there. It's really just a great toolbox we got going
good
here.
Stuff.
Good stuff. Yeah, really good stuff.
Oh,
We just need
so
some
awesome.
answers to why it works.
Oh, but this is, I mean, this has been the fastest 2 hours. This has just been such a pleasure to meet you guys and spend some time with you and your bones. And thank you so much for being so generous to share with us. I definitely want to come back and have another Zoom meeting because I know that there's a lot more stories that you have behind you.
We talked about the fascia.
Yeah, we didn't even get to fascia. I know fascia's like so cool. So please promise that you'll come back and we can talk about fascia and other things.
Yeah. Well, the good thing about the Apollo story is we now have, how many do we have now? 4 or 5 horses who fit that protocol who were donated, and I'll be getting 4 of those skeletons this summer in May, bringing them back. So we'll have some new information to kind of help with the Apollo story. So.
Well, and this kind of, I mean, you guys are doing real research and looking, and I love the fact that you're scientifically approaching this and not jumping to conclusions and researching it out, because that's the kind of information we really need.
Yeah.
If we're going to make wise choices and really start to impact the industry and change the breeding methods that we're using and the training methods that we're using, it has to be solid. It can't just be somebody's opinion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Wendy. Your webinars are awesome, and we're appreciative that people stuck through with our blabbering on.
Oh no, you've had over 40 people on here on the webinar, and like at minimum of 25 on Facebook the whole time. So just thank you again, and anybody who wants to see all the other webinars, just please go to my Surefoot Equine YouTube channel. At the beginning of each week, actually on the weekend, I put out an email listing all my guests with the links to to register for all the webinars. So in order to be on that email list, you just go to murdochmethod.com and join my email list so that on the weekend you get that email and you can get registered for the webinars. We've already got guests lined up through the middle of June, and I'm gonna book it in certainly through June, and then see how I go from there, because this is way too much fun and I'm learning too much. So I'm having a
awesome. We're all learning a lot. Thank you, Wendy.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, well, thank you, and thank you everybody for joining us. And until tomorrow, we have Monique Craig, and we're going to be talking about the foot. So please join us tomorrow, and we'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye. Stay safe.
Yeah, you too.